Hello, and welcome to Open Wounds Podcast. I'm your host, Candice. This podcast is about healing the wounds that you can't see and leading a revolution against oppressive systems that keep them open. We're going to talk about really practical tools for managing complex PTSD, as well as dive into relevant current day topics that make healing a daily practice. You can follow us at IG at Open Wounds Podcast or watch on YouTube at Open Wounds Podcast. Please rate, review, like, subscribe, all the things, and enjoy this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. I'm your host, Candice. I have a guest with me today, Abigail D'Agostino. She is an expert on death, dying, hospice, all things related to end of life. Her Instagram is fascinating. She's always giving great drops of knowledge on her Instagram. So if you guys want to follow her, I will link that for you guys in the show notes. But welcome to Open Wounds Podcast, Abigail. Thanks for being on.
Well, thanks for having me, Candice. I love your podcast, so really happy to be on.
Thank you. I would always usually ask my guests, like, how did you get into this field and why are you passionate about it and what inspired you to write a whole book about hospice and death and dying better because it's not like a topic I hear a lot of people talking about.
No, and it's so natural for us not to want to talk about it. So, and I just was always kind of into it, not like overtly, but even as a
Mm,
kid, I always just wondered what would happen afterwards and
mm,
had my own. It wasn't really a near death experience. It was kind of near death adjacent experience. It
mm,
wasn't, I didn't die, but I had the flashback of my life when I was caught under a wave. But, and then other experiences, but really just working in the field as a nurse, even as a new nurse. And then going into hospice and palliative care, there were just so many things that I saw and places where we had more opportunity to make the experience much better.
mm.
And so it came with a lot of lessons learned. And the thing that I really like about the whole end of life, death stuff, and the fact that we're in this body that eventually dies is nothing levels the playing field like death. And
Mm.
so for me, it always kept me really grounded, but it also reminds me, and I think us, that we're all really the same. I think
Yeah.
we're special because we're all so different. We bring our own individual character traits, whatever it is, to the table.
Mhm.
But I like how it really makes us more, helps us remember that we're more the same and more similar than we are different. So, we're all doing this and we're all going to experience the same emotions, the same types of things in life. It just might look a little different, but we all
Mhm.
end up kind of in the same place. So that's what I really like about it.
So you've been you did hospice care at the bedside for a
Hmm.
while, and then you
Hmm.
did more like the administrative side of like hospice and end of life care. So
Yeah.
when you were working with those things and you said, you wanted to make the experience better, which
Hmm.
I feel like you said, no matter who you are, no matter what you come from in life, that transition, or when you are the person witnessing a loved one
Hmm.
going through that transition, it is so intense. It's so fraught with so much emotion. And then it also kind of, what I've seen, it brings out like either the best or the worst in people. So
Hmm.
you get like the person who's dying may be totally at peace with it, but then all the people surrounding them just start to unravel. So
Hmm.
can you talk a little bit about like what it was that you saw? You were like, man, this is not good, and we could do this so much better.
Yeah. And there was so much that I learned. And I did start first in the hospital in the ICU where I
Mm,
saw a lot of opportunity there where we saw the sickest of the sickest patients and they would basically treat them. My boss always used to say treat them to death, where they were treating them and doing all this stuff to try to fix the problem when that person's body was at a different stage and needed different
mm,
care. So, and in response to what you said about, these experiences, coping mechanisms are just magnified at the time of death.
mm,
So if you have these coping mechanisms that are a little destructive, they're going to really magnify at the time of death.
mm,
And you're right, those situations where maybe the person's actually dying, maybe is cool. They just want to be comfortable. They're ready. They've been living with the disease or conditions,
Right.
and the family can't seem to get on the same page. So
Mhm.
this is why, before the yogurt hits the fan and gets all over the place, is when we have to have the conversations now. We got to do it before all that happens, because once we're in those sticky situations, as you can imagine, probably in your own life or you've seen,
Yeah.
it's too overwhelming. We're way too emotional. We can't think straight. So we can do so much ahead of time, which is a big reason why I wrote the book. And I wrote it in a 31-day format. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
31 days for 31 days to basically, that last chapter of your loved one's life and how to kind
Mhm.
of navigate that. And I tend to tie in a lot of humor with my stuff because my point of reference is death.
Yeah.
So anything else doesn't seem as, you know, of
Yeah,
course,
I've
all the
seen
things
some of
related to it.
your videos where you're being, like, the Grim
And being
Reaper of
auntie death,
death,
the
and
death.
you're, like,
Yes.
talking about, like, it in a funny, humorous way, so I
Yes.
think that helps people kind of, like you said, it's a topic a lot of people wanna shy away from, especially in the US, all
Oh,
culture
yeah.
not all cultures are like this, so
No, but even when I'm, here living in Germany, I was talking with someone. And then they asked what I did, and then I mentioned it, and they said, "Oh," and it's always kind of the same sort of, "Oh," and they don't wanna be casual about it. So, but they are, and I was also even, like, on a live stream, they said, "Oh, so someone passing away." They can't even use the word death, so
Mhm.
it's all of that. But and it's okay. It's okay to just acknowledge that we're afraid of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen a bunch of deaths that were really, really great, and my body is still afraid, and everyone still gets shocked when I
Mhm.
say that.
Really?
You're still afraid of it. Yeah, my body is afraid. I know my body's afraid.
Mhm.
Maybe on my spiritual realm, my
Right.
mental, I have a different view of it, but my body is designed for survival, just like your body is.
Yeah, yeah.
All of our bodies are designed for survival. Our nervous systems are designed for survival. So the reason why we have a drive to eat every several hours or every hour, depending on your metabolism, to drink, to rest, to reproduce, all those things come out of that need for survival.
Yeah.
So as much as we've evolved, we're still living and existing in a biological body that wants to survive.
Yeah.
So it's natural for it to fear death. So I want to normalize the fear for people. And I'm not saying that by talking about it and planning it, you're going to get rid of your fear. You're
Right.
probably going to really help assuage, kind of calm it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But you do have some agency over this part of your life and the life of your loved one, especially when it
Mhm.
comes to this time of life for them. And the other thing, the reason why I really love the work that you do, especially, with reference to trauma,
Yeah.
is because trauma is really intimately tied to this time of life.
Mm.
People think, oh, they're going to die and that's it. But trauma really comes to the forefront. These things with which we don't deal earlier in life
Yes.
comes to the forefront because the body is physically starting to break down.
Mm.
The reserves that used to really maintain or kind of keep everything down and just kind of put away,
Mhm.
they start to weaken. And so what you start to see, especially when we worked with people who survived the Holocaust
Right.
or people who had post-traumatic stress conditions from like the military,
Right.
they would be actively dying, they would be unconscious, but they would have issues come up, such as terminal agitation. So, agitation that is specific at the end of life.
Oh, wow.
This looks completely different than agitation or anxiety that you see in someone who's up and walking around.
Mm.
And it can be very tough to treat sometimes. So, and there's so many things that you do other than just medication. In hospice and palliative care, you look at the person as a whole. So
Right.
you look at all these different aspects, their existential distress, including their physical. So this podcast and what you're doing is so critical and so important. And it is important to talk about death because if we don't deal with that stuff, it stays with us till the very end
Mm.
and will manifest
Yeah.
in these symptoms that may be challenging to treat.
Yeah, that reminds me of the trope that you see in so many TV shows and movies where like there's somebody on their deathbed and they're like unburdening all their deepest, darkest secrets on their
Yeah.
family members before they die. And I always thought
Yeah.
that was kind of silly. But when you're talking about stuff that we've really mismanaged or been burdened by or stressed
Mhm.
by or been repressing, your body doesn't, it's like been trying to let you let it out all this time. And if you've been fighting it, your body's still like, okay, I got to get this off. I got to get this off my chest kind of thing. So when you're seeing that, is that part of why you're talking about like planning ahead? Like, okay, do I need to have these conversations now with these people? Is that part of what the book is cueing people towards?
Yeah. So the book touches on something that is paramount in my 20 years of experience that I've really seen as just people were we either that just were opportunities. So yes, I do definitely touch on this. I
Mm,
think in a couple of days because just like you said, it comes out, and I really like in your recent interview. Talking about this in October of 2025. In your recent interview with Dr. Hector, you had mentioned that, there's all these modalities, there's talk therapy, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, but that may not work,
right.
for somebody, especially with trauma. So you may have
Yeah.
to get into the body more, some somatic
Mm,
therapy, something like that,
yeah.
or really trauma specific stuff. And it's different for every person. So yes, you have to really look at this and really start to dive into these parts and aspects of yourself because they
Mm,
just don't go away.
yeah.
And to paint the picture a little bit more about what can happen, and it's not to instill fear, it's
Right.
to help people understand what it can look like. So
Mm,
when you don't deal, especially with trauma because of your, podcast and this and
yeah.
what you cover, um, as you know, trauma is really it's kept, and the responses in your nervous system. It
Hmm.
festers. It's alive in your nervous system. So when you don't deal with that, are when these symptoms come up. So now you have a body that is declining and or dying.
Right.
So it's not responding to treatments like it did before,
Hmm.
and and it's not able to hold down what it once did. So you have
Hmm.
someone who is in bed who can't respond, you can't rationalize this person. You can't say,
Right.
okay, take some deep breaths,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever it is, do your box breathing, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not going to work. So this person is agitated. They're trying to climb out of bed, even though they can't
Yeah.
rationalize with you. And they're pulling stuff out. Maybe they have a catheter, a Foley catheter, which is the tube that goes into your bladder. They could be pulling stuff out, and they could be falling and hitting themselves on the floor. It's a never ending, and that can happen for up to 48 hours, 72 hours. It can be an ongoing thing.
Oh, no.
You could be giving this person medication, and they may nap for 20 minutes.
Mm, yeah.
So now you don't obviously, and you have to be very thoughtful and careful when you medicate people. And so
Right.
you don't
Yes.
just give them a huge load of narcotics. You titrate, you
Right.
dose it slow and go very slowly and start low. But you have these symptoms that pop up, and there's so many other things that can come out. It can be so serious to the point where you might be trying to treat this person for days, and I would have nurses at the bedside 24/7,
Hmm.
not just treating the physical part, but other things. And I'll get into that you may have to do something called palliative sedation, where you purposefully, intentionally sedate that person
Hmm.
to get them calm. And that's when you use things like you use in the operating room, like Valium, or you
Mm,
might bring them to the hospital and put them on a ketamine drip. So these things, I'm telling you because this is very real. This is
yeah.
very real. When you don't deal with your stuff, this
It's
is
going to come
something
out
that can
one way or
happen.
another.
It
Yeah.
comes out one way or the other, yeah. And people think, "Oh my gosh, so, well, we're doing the physical stuff, we're treating medications, what else can we do?" So the clinicians, the counselors, they're spiritual or they're the medical social workers, they're trained to work with the family and talk to the patient, even though the patient can't talk, on how to address these other non-physical parts of them.
Mm,
So there's ways to tell, and I go over that in the book, like how to talk to your loved one, telling them that you forgive them for A, B, and
mm,
C, whatever it is. So there's all that because that is just as important as treating with the medications.
right.
So, yeah, it's a very interesting experience when you worked in the medical field and then you really start to specialize in this and you really see that it can be almost a different type of medicine when it
Mm,
comes to death and dying. And and that's what I want people to think of it as,
yeah.
because they get really upset when you can't pursue curative stuff to cure the
Mhm.
disease,
Yeah.
which is so normal and healthy. But I want you to think, and I want people to think about it as you want to treat the body for what its needs are. So
Yeah.
instead of treating it with the blood transfusions and things that are causing issues, you have a dying, declining body and you want to treat it with the dying medicine.
Yeah.
Hospice, for example. So you're giving that body exactly the right treatment. It's still aggressive in nature, but it's
Right.
the right treatment. So that's really tailored to the needs.
Yeah. That
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen the movie with Michelle Williams called Dying for Sex. It is
Someone mentioned it
it's
to me, and I really
so
have to see
good.
it.
It's funny. It's like dark comedy mixed
Okay.
with she's dying of cancer, but she's very young. But
Okay.
there is a character, there's a nurse, and I think it's a stand-up comedian that plays the part because she plays it so well. But she was like, she's in hospice care, and this nurse is kind of giving her the rundown of like, first this will happen, then this will happen, and then this will
Okay.
happen. And the nurse is like, I just love death. And the people are like, what are you on? But I thought it was so beautiful because this is such a natural part of being a human. Like
Mhm.
you said, we're all going to experience it no matter what age we get there. And to avoid and pretend like it's not going to happen and try to fight it is just going to make the situation more difficult. If we can, you know, instead of fighting it, kind of not necessarily welcome it, we may not be happy about
Mhm.
it, but kind of
Yeah.
just surrender to the process. Like,
Mhm.
this is what's going to happen to all of us eventually. And so, if we can be as comfortable as possible and as aware, like you said, we can't have these conversations when we're dysregulated or our
Mhm.
brain isn't completely functioning. I know my dad had hepatitis C, and he
Mhm.
was his liver was failing and he was cognitively declined. He was in the hospital. And so you would go to visit him and he was speaking nonsense, and he
Yeah.
was on all these medications to try to
Yeah.
sedate him,
Mhm.
because he was like trying to wander around, and they're like, you cannot wander around. Once he had his liver transplant, he made a miraculous recovery. But
Mhm.
it's so interesting because if you don't know what's going on, this process can be so confusing and so disorienting. And I think the other thing that I see so much with, unfortunately, the boomer generation is they have, and I did want to ask you about this because I dealt with this with my mother in law, and I'm going to deal with it again with my mom and dad when they pass. But they have this, like, pride of, like,
Mhm.
I don't wanna talk about this. This isn't your problem. This is
Mhm.
my stuff. I've one of my very close friends dealt with this with her father, where they're not telling you what's happening. The doctors
Mhm.
and the nurses months ago have told them X, Y, and Z is wrong. These are the things that are gonna happen. You only have this much time left, and they don't disclose it to the family. They don't tell the family, and so then months go by and all of a sudden the person's in the hospital and you're going, what's wrong? I didn't know there was anything wrong. I thought you were fine. So can you talk a little bit more about, like, how do you have those conversations when the dying person is not cooperating, and
Mhm.
they're kind of like, they just don't, I guess they don't want to be a burden. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure each person,
Mhm.
the reason why they're not sharing is different. But
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about how, like, if you are the child going through
Mhm.
this, or the sister or the brother, like, what's the best approach in that scenario?
Yeah, and, and all of this is additionally more complex with the relationships that you have. And
Yeah,
especially when you talk about the boomer generation, that those parents, they grew up a little differently.
yeah,
They're not, the parents nowadays are a little different, and our generation has become, we're a little maybe more open in some cases. I'm not saying everybody, but,
right.
we deal with things a little differently. And first of all, I do want to normalize these experiences,
Yeah,
normalizing the grief, normalizing the fear, normalizing the anger. And
Yeah.
anger is a secondary emotion. So whenever you
Mhm.
see anger, you have to look at what's behind or beneath,
Right.
whatever sits better with you, because it's usually sadness, grief, anticipated grief,
Mhm.
fear, the whole slew of things.
Yeah.
So, and anger is really healthy. I mean, all of these things are, if you, it's really healthy. I always say it's really healthy if we fear death. If you're fearing death, good.
Yeah.
You're there's a part of you that's really healthy, so that's
Yeah.
good. So when it comes to these parents especially and where they are, and if you have any opportunity to have a discussion with them, and if you can ask them if something was happening, like if something was happening, just to say, if you weren't going to tell me, could you tell me the reason why you wouldn't tell me? Because
Yeah.
I've seen number of different things. Parents were either concerned about being a burden,
Right.
um, and more than anything, and they didn't want to upset their children. They didn't want to put their children through anything, which is kind of like the burden.
Yeah.
And then where we go in those conversation is, okay, so say you have this thing, and then you end up in the hospital next month. So what do you think is going to happen there if I have to go and I have no information? Do you think it'll
Right.
be a burden by that point? And sometimes you really have to just do the kind of walk through scenarios.
Mhm. Yeah.
So in the book, I think it's on day 8, I go through a little exercise specifically for something like this or these kind of type of scenarios based on people's desire for quality of life and what it might look like for them
Right.
based on a little scale that I created. So so this is why it's good to have those conversations, and talk about it now. And when you're having those conversations, normalize being irritated, normalize being afraid, normalize that we don't like it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're going to have the talk right now. It's going to be weird. It's going to feel uncomfortable and we're not going to like it, but we'll just time it for 10 minutes. That's
Yeah.
all we can do,
Yeah.
and make that like a normal part of it because rather we just keep pushing it away and keep not wanting to talk about it. And that doesn't really get us anywhere.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's the frustrating part is because it feels like you're being blindsided, right?
Yeah.
Like, this person and there's also, like, especially what my one friend was talking about, she said it feels sort of like a betrayal, like this
Hmm.
person knew that this was coming, they knew
Hmm.
all this was happening, and they hid it from me,
Yep.
and then
Hmm.
now I'm mad at them that they hid it from me
Hmm.
because I think there's a delusion sort of that we think we could have prepared better for this, right? Like, if I would have known that you had cancer and that you were gonna die in 6 months, I could have prepared myself, right? There's also in this scenario, and I'm assuming your book talks about this too, there's a
Hmm.
lot of very horrible practical things that come with the passing of a loved one.
Oh,
If we're talking about, like, their belongings, their property, their bank accounts, their phone like, I had my mother-in-law like, it was kind of nice to see my mother-in-law go through it with my father-in-law because I just
okay.
got a little peek of, like, she tried to cancel his cell phone, and they're like, "No, you're under contract." The cell phone company wanted a death certificate to let her
Yeah.
off her and I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me? It's a
Yeah.
cell phone." But they
I
like,
know.
Sprint or
I know.
whoever was so in it that they were like, "No, you're not getting out of this contract." So there's so many
Hmm.
things that, like, we're trying to grieve the person that we love
Right. And you should
passing,
be able to have that space to
and we
grieve, but no,
we
you
don't have the
can't.
time because there's somebody from a mortgage company calling you or somebody
Mhm,
from a like the life insurance policy wants 17 forms of proof.
mhm.
Like there were so many things where I was like, this feels like a full-time job and I
Job.
don't have time to cry. I don't
Mhm,
have time to sit here and feel what I want to feel because
mhm,
there's like a mountain of paperwork. So can you talk a little bit about like what are things people can do now before you get
mhm,
there to, like to help that, to navigate that, to have these hard conversations with our loved ones?
mhm. So there are a couple different things, there's the talk about quality of life because that is so paramount, and
Yeah.
I'll put that aside for now, but then they're just the basic logistics. And before I get into that, I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown.
Yes.
I'm guessing you are,
Yes. She's great. I love
knowing
her.
she's great. And in one of her first books, oh, it's one of her first books, that came out, I think, probably 10 or so
I
years
feel like I've
ago.
read like 4 of her books and my brain just
Daring Greatly, I think is
yes,
what it was.
that's a
Yeah,
good
because I'm trying to remember which one it was. And so she was telling the story of a husband whose wife went into remission from cancer and how he lived every day after that remission with the fear of her cancer coming back.
Mm,
And his rationalization for that was to basically
yeah,
prepare himself. And then the cancer came back and she died. And then he ended up sitting with Brene and he was talking and he said, as much as I thought I was preparing, I was never really prepared for the end.
yeah, yeah,
So I bring this up is because, and I also talk about this in the book, it's going to happen. The emergency room call is going to happen when you're at work and and you just drop the kids off, for example, and you have to go figure out what to do before
right,
you go run to the emergency room. Mom or dad may die all of a sudden in their sleep. So
right.
these things are going to happen, and you still may feel like, whoa, this came out of nowhere and like it's a
Mhm,
surprise. And there is a reason for that. There's so many different reasons why people die at a certain time or die a certain way, whatever it is. But that's important to really acknowledge and spend some time kind of chewing on because the more we can sub- subject our nervous systems to these thinking patterns to kind of play these mock scenarios in our head, and there's a whole exercise with that too, the more familiar your nervous system becomes with it,
mm,
and the less of a shock it's going to be when it does happen.
nice.
You're still preparing to feel a little sideline. You're still preparing to feel a little thrown off because
Yeah,
it's a big moment. All the stuff around this is big and it's overwhelming, up to and including the stuff afterwards.
right.
But when I was talking to somebody about just the audiences that I want to talk to, I said, I want to talk to people who are doing their financial planning,
Mhm,
in particular, and kind of taxes, real
yeah,
estate, whatever it is. The reason why is because these things we know happen. We know we have to pay our taxes. We know that we have to deal with our finances
yeah.
at some point because we're hoping to retire. So we're not always as good as planning goes. So throw in the dying aspect
Yeah, exactly.
because that stuff is going to happen. We need to deal with that stuff. And
Yeah,
all of that stuff is really intertwined. And there are a lot of resources out there too as to
mhm,
going through your list and, like my husband's father he's got the binder, he likes the
mhm,
binder thing where he has everything laid out where this is, where the accounts are with this, blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
And that's really great. And that, you can either sit down one afternoon or a couple afternoons once a month or once a quarter and put those together, or you can make a weekend out of it
mhm,
and do it with, your good snacks, those really, good snacks.
mhm,
And, do it with a group online, whatever it is. But it is so worth doing because it is something that is going to happen.
yeah,
And depending on the relationship you have with your parents, if you have a parent that is very compassionate, empathetic, and really is watching out for you,
yeah,
then you communicate with them. This is how a really good way to show me that you're watching out for me.
mhm,
Right.
right.
Because, if they're worried about being a burden, this is a way that you're not a burden to me.
Yeah, yeah,
And then take them through to, because imagine when you're gone and I have to take the kids to school and I'm dealing with work, but I'm trying to figure out how to cancel your whatever it is,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important.
If you're that
Yeah,
lucky, if you can even
the
talk to your parents.
right. The binder thing is an excellent idea even
Uh-huh.
for those of us that are younger because
Mhm.
we don't know, like, what's that Bible scripture? You don't know the day or the hour, like, nobody knows
No,
when it's gonna happen, like,
no.
I always I sort of, morbidly joke with my 2 sons. I was
Mhm.
like, "If I got killed by a car tomorrow, you need to know how to run the washing machine." Like,
Mhm.
you just need
Right.
to know these things,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
so, um, even for us younger people, that binder is an excellent idea because there's bank accounts, there's credit cards, there's all these different things. And even if you
Mhm.
don't pay an attorney to write you a will, you can
Mhm.
still give people something to work with, right? Um, at
Yeah, but
least something to go off of. A will is like the best, right? Obviously.
well, the best is a living revocable trust.
Mm,
because if the will is great, but the best is the living revocable trust. And then also you have to look at your state, obviously, and see what else is really specific to that state. But the living revocable trust is really key because if your loved one is still alive, there's ways that you can go about accessing funds and things like that because they may be alive, but they may have had a stroke.
mm,
And now they're months and months living post stroke, but they're not cognitively available to make a decision.
mm.
And at
Yeah,
that point, then you're dealing with court,
right.
probate stuff. I mean, everything. And that costs thousands of dollars. That takes a lot of time. And then you might be spending your own money for medical treatment
Yeah.
when they had money available and set aside. So a living revocable trust in most states needs to be included in your will plans, in your
Mm,
durable power of attorney for healthcare and
yeah.
finances. You need to make sure you have a living
Yep.
revocable. Now, if people are on a budget, I know for a while, and I have no relationship, Susie Orman has done like little kind of a whole like little packet of things that you can just do online
Oh,
and then you
nice.
can modify it as you go. And then all you need to do is just get that notarized.
That's
And I
nice.
always say too, even if you like things on paper, make sure things are digital and make sure, when you talk about what your wishes are and to your durable health to your durable power of attorney for healthcare, don't just have that paper on there, have the conversation. And I always say too, write a letter and include that in with all your medical
Mhm.
documents and your electronic drive and or leave a video or a voice memo. It's really important for medical decision makers, like your loved ones, like your children, to not just have your durable power of attorney for healthcare and see what your wishes are there, but it's because it's all in legal medical language,
Right.
but to also for you to tell them what's important. So when I first moved here, my father was updating his paperwork and he added my brother to it, and my brother recently became a physician, and since he's there and they were in the same state, he added them to the all the medical stuff.
Yeah.
But my brother has a different philosophy.
Mm.
So I said, I need, because of course, I talked to my parents about
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
you know, and I said, you need to write a letter to us and just put it in the email or just make a video. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be long, but tell us why you're doing this, why you're making the decisions you are,
Yeah.
because this will help at the time to see mom's face or dad's face or hear mom's voice or see their handwriting as to what's important. So I always recommend keeping that
That's
even
such a
with the
good
legal
tip.
documents.
I think,
Yeah.
and again, going back to the avoidant boomer parents is like
Yeah.
we went through this whole scenario with my mother-in-law where she'd gone in, like I talked her into going and getting like get a will, get it in writing, get it legal because
Yeah.
I had seen my friend go through it and it was in probate, like you said, and it was in court
Oh,
for
it's
like 2
terrible.
years.
Oh,
And my friend
terrible.
was like, I have
So
to
much
keep
money.
going to court and I have to keep taking time off of work. And she was flying from another state or driving. So I talked my mother in law into getting this will, but she never sat down and had these hard conversations with
Mhm.
all of her children because she had 3 sons and a stepson, right? And so
And they're
she
all going to agree.
no, no, of course not.
Of course
Even
not.
when we all get along, we still don't all agree. Like, I get
Right.
along with my siblings, but I'm sure we do not all agree on things. And so
Mhm.
then she went and changed the will, and she didn't
Yep.
really tell anybody
Mm.
because I mean, it was valid, the reasons why she changed it and why she disinherited, I would say, which it's not like it was a bunch of money, but um were completely valid, but she never had these hard conversations with them. And
Mhm.
so when she died, it was a shit show. Like it was chaos, right? And
Oh, I
so
can only imagine.
then the people who are left being like the durable power of attorney, whoever that person is, becomes like the target is on their back because all
Mhm.
the other family members are like, why didn't you get to be the person? Da 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 da. Da. And so I really feel like this goes back to like have these conversations, have like sit down, talk to the people about it, ask them. I mean, obviously you can't always get your parents to talk about everything, but if you
Mhm.
can and you have, like you said, have a decent relationship with these family members,
just get them to talk about these things because
Mhm.
there's, like you
And do it
said,
now.
yeah, do
Yeah.
it now, and the
Mhm.
video is such a good idea, um, or even, like you said, a voice note or
Mhm.
something, a letter.
Whatever works. Literally
Yeah,
whatever works. For a lot of
it's
these people, it
coming
is
from
handwriting, but
it's
you can
much
upload that
different,
and
yeah,
everything.
coming from the voice of the person who's
Yeah.
making the decision instead of, like, just a blank paper that's written by, or not a blank, a paper that's written by an attorney. It's like, "Well, why did she do this? Why did he do
Mhm.
this? Why did they make
Mhm.
these decisions?" And then there's all these emotions that could have been avoided
Mhm.
if the conversations
Yeah.
were had. Um, yeah, I think that's so crucial because there's almost like secondary trauma. It's like you're
Mhm.
traumatized because this person you love has died, but now you're traumatized by all the decisions they made that you didn't know they were making, right? And so you're
Mhm.
like reeling and you're trying to process all these things at the same time, and it's really difficult, and I've seen a lot of people just kind of clamp down and white
Mhm.
knuckle it, and then, like, 6 months later, they kinda just, like, lose their shit and, like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're, like, crying in the bathroom at work, and they can't get out of bed, um, type thing happening because it's like you had to just get through that difficult moment. But, I know there was a lot of things we've bounced around about. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you're like, "You know what? This is really important that everybody know this about death and dying, and it's something that we don't talk about enough?"
There are so many things, but the one thing I always wanna leave the listeners with, or people who are watching, that you do have agency over this phase in your life, and I really look at it as another phase. I personally look at it as another phase in our being. I look at all the stages and seasons, but
Mhm.
we do have some agency. We're not gonna have complete control, but with understanding things like hospice, with understanding how to talk to your doctors, and asking what things mean and how it's going to impact day to day, and when are we needing to shift our goals of medical care from trying to cure something
Right.
to allowing for your loved one to be comfortable and really treating that body that is declining and dying with the appropriate care. And
Mm,
it's not, and secondly, I would like to say it's not giving up. It feels like it
mm,
because there's loss and there's anticipated grief associated with it. But that is the grief part talking.
yeah.
So there are ways, and I talk about this, there are ways to still have hope, but you got to practice it ahead of time because
Yeah.
otherwise it's really going to feel it's going to feel very disingenuous. It's not really going to resonate with you. So
Mhm.
this is just like you said, having these types of conversations, personalizing the messages, whatever it is, doing all this before all this stuff happens because it saves you so much.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want people to think about too is when you are working with or dealing with a loved one who is dying, you are going to grieve at so many different points,
Mm,
not just when that person dies,
yeah.
right? So you're going to see the changes. So even, with that was your father you were talking about, right? With the liver.
Yes.
Yeah. So he really changed after the transplant, but you saw him in a position where he wasn't himself,
Right.
right? And you saw how confused he was. This is a very typical case with any type of liver diagnosis or diagnoses because you have the encephalopathy
Mm,
and the liver isn't doing its job. So you have all these, chemicals and stuff hitting the brain everywhere.
right.
So it is causing this confusion, a lot of agitation. But then you have these cases of dementia or brain cancer
Right.
or other types of things that are happening, and you're seeing this changes in your loved one. You're seeing that they can't physically do something anymore. You see the personality changes.
Mm,
And with that can become not just grief, but a lot of complex issues.
mm.
So, especially the example I gave, which happens more often than not, are daughters with their mothers. It's always like this, where they had a real tough relationship because the mother was either abusive or traumatized, whatever the daughter, and they weren't very close. And then the mother gets some kind of cognitive type of issue condition,
Mm.
and then she changes. The mother becomes sweet, the mother becomes more loving, presenting,
Present.
and and then then she dies, and this daughter has complex grief because not only is she grieving the mother she never had, then she's grieving the mother she got to experience for, like, a couple of days or a month.
Yeah.
So this is why we talk about this stuff now, because this can be a very complicated thing
Mhm.
because we're dealing with the humanness of life, and
Yeah.
it just is a lot. But there is something to be said for just giving it a little bit of time. I
Mhm.
mean, we spend so much time on social media, in front of the TV, and we can just give a little bit of time so that you have some agency
Yeah.
over this time in your life or the life of your loved one.
There were 2 things that you said in there that I wanna kind of circle back to
Sure.
is, the first one was that you kinda indicated, like, not that people choose to die, but, like, people
Mhm,
die in all different sorts of ways and in all different types of ways, and it's almost like and I
mhm,
do believe, like I was having this conversation with a good friend of mine. She has a grandmother that's 90 or was 93, and they had a stroke.
mhm,
And they learned how to write with their other hand. They relearned
mhm,
how to walk at the age of 93. They
mhm,
relearned how to do things, and now they're like 102. And I'm just like baffled. I was like, this woman,
mhm,
man, what a badass. Like she's not giving up. But then you see other people who are in their 70s and they just check out. Like you can tell they've chosen to
mhm,
leave at this time.
mhm.
They don't want to be here anymore. And so I think part of that is like, you know, we can't control our parents or our grandparents or our loved ones, but when we're talking about ourselves and looking into
Mhm.
the future, how is that like what have you seen and why is it that some people will choose to just like hang on and how much control I guess is what I'm asking is that
It's a
do
great
we
question.
have over this process for ourselves?
It's a great question, and I've dedicated a day to this because it is true, and I've seen it so many times, and, yes, I've talked about this because sometimes people take a really long time to die, for example, like you said, and you can't explain it physically anymore. So you have somebody who is already what we call cachectic. They're they're anorexic. I mean, they're very, very thin, and they haven't eaten. They've been in bed. They've been unconscious. They haven't eaten in weeks,
Yeah.
and nor have they drank anything. And there's no reason they should be physically alive.
Yeah.
There's no reason. And that's when we should be doing this beforehand, but that's when, I remember we have multiple conversations around our interdisciplinary team meetings. What could this person be hanging on to? What
Mhm.
is the thing that they need to in order to let go? And the family might have said, "Oh, I told them to let go. It's okay." But what is it?
Yeah.
Then what we have to do is we have to talk to and interview the loved ones, the caregivers around the table. So is there something that maybe mom didn't forgive herself for? Is there something
Mhm.
that maybe she was always a little hanging on to? And sometimes we can get information, and I remember having a conversation with a wife, same situation. She called me and she said, "My husband hasn't let go yet." And I said, as I went through my little questions that I
Yeah.
have listed in the book. And she said, "Oh, you know what? That one resonates with me. Oh my gosh, I'm going to go talk to him."
Mhm.
And that was great. And then sometimes people are just waiting for somebody to either come or to go. And I have to tell you, I saw this in the hospital even before I went to hospice and palliative care. They were waiting for their son who was abroad, who was stationed on a military base, and we would make sure the family would tell the person dying, tell mom who's dying that her son is on his way. He left Afghanistan. He's going to be here tomorrow at 9 a.m.
So
And you
even
tell
when
that
the
person.
patient's not verbally able to
Mhm.
respond, they are
Hearing is the last
listening.
sense to
Okay.
go. Hearing is the last sense to go, and we can get into that later, but there's been a number of different, documented experiences on this where hearing is the last
Mhm.
sense to go. So
Wow.
this is why I say keep talking as one of the other, days, because this is so important. So when you're at the bedside, tell your loved one when you're coming, when you're going, because
Mhm.
sometimes the second you leave or second you go to the bathroom is when they decide to die.
That happened to my friend. And
And
I
it's not
swear to
because they
God,
did
she was
anything
like,
wrong, but because
hadn't ate in days, and she decided to go get a sandwich. Yeah.
yeah. And I always, for me, this one always just it just was one of those moments where I just said, I sometimes I think parents or guardians are parents till the very end or guardians till the very end.
Yeah.
And this is what they may choose to do. Because I
Mhm.
firmly believe, and just because I've seen it so many times and heard my staff tell these stories so many times, that I really do believe people do have this some agency over when they die in terms of their timing as when they're dying. So what I mean by what I say a parent, sometimes the parent to the very end, is because that parent will just wait until their child leaves to die and to die by themselves. And some people go, oh, but they die by themselves. Well, we all die by ourselves. We're all doing
Yeah.
it by ourselves.
Yeah. Well,
We're all going to be dying.
I think it's so important that we recognize the
Mhm.
person's agency in this. It may not be
That's
what
the point.
we wanted, but if they want
Exactly.
to be alone, let them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
that whole theory of like, yes, you may have wanted to be holding their hand and
Right.
sitting next to them, but if
Because that
that's
was really
not
important to
what they
you.
wanted,
Hmm.
we have to acknowledge like they still have that agency. I think there's so
Hmm.
much mystery around death because we don't talk about it. And that's why these conversations are so important that we continue to have them, because I do think there is so much more agency in this process than we realize, because there's so many studies on how you have somebody who's functioning in their home and
Hmm.
then you put them in a nursing home and they
Yeah.
rapidly
Right.
deteriorate, or you take them
Hmm.
out of the nursing home and you move them
Or you
back.
change the pictures and
Yeah,
all of the music and
you
everything.
do
That
things.
study that
Yeah.
was done. Hmm.
Yes. So there's
Yeah.
different things that you can tell that the person's choosing not to be here anymore. And
Right.
that's difficult for us because we want them here, but that doesn't mean we still have to respect their wishes. Um,
And there's one more thing on that, if I
yeah,
may,
go ahead.
because what happens is like when I've done some of these live streams and stuff, then I'm talking with people about those situations that are very similar to what we just talked about. I'm talking to them after the fact and they feel like, I just feel so guilty. I wasn't there. I got
Mm,
up and I went to go take a shower, or I just went to use the restroom, even though I was sitting there for 3 days in a row and mom died.
yeah,
And this is why, I mean, had we been able to have that discussion before or understand what might be happening, she could be in a different place right now, mentally and emotionally, versus having to kind of work backward,
right,
after the
right.
fact, and listen to somebody she doesn't really know, trying to explain to her what might have happened. So, yes, another
Yeah,
reason why to delve into this part of our lives is definitely going to happen a little bit
yeah.
earlier. So, yeah.
Yeah, good point. The other thing that I thought was fascinating, and I have seen this too with my mother-in-law's sisters,
Hmm.
like this one, I won't say her name just for her, family member in
Yeah.
case they ever
Anonymity.
hear
Hmm.
this, but she was not a very nice person her whole life.
Hmm.
She was pretty cruel and
Yep.
critical and negative, and she started to have dementia and
Hmm.
ended up in a nursing home, and she regressed back to like this fun teenage lady. She was like,
Yep.
"Oh, my boyfriend's gonna come pick me up. We're gonna go
Hmm.
to the dance." Like she was a hoot, and she was
Hmm.
funny and
Hmm.
joyful and relaxed and affectionate. And I feel
Affectionate,
like,
which is really
yeah,
messes with your head.
yeah, and it's like it's almost more easy to understand when they flip the opposite, when they were
Hmm.
a nice, loving person, and then the dementia, they become angry and agitated and
Hmm.
combative, and it's difficult to care for them. I think people have an easier time wrapping their heads around that than
Yeah,
they
that's the
do
dementia.
this
Hmm.
reversal, because you're like, wait, that part of you was in there this whole
Hmm.
time and you didn't let it out, and we all suffered around you because you
Yeah.
chose to go this other way. So can you talk a little bit about like what that process is, and how can people who are going through that specific scenario where this person that they've had in their lives is suddenly completely opposite to what they were used to?
Yeah. Well, and I brushed over that very briefly when you kind of said to kind of summarize, anything else to go over. Because, and I brought that up specifically because it happens more than I think we realize,
Mm,
where you have these shifts, particularly in people with any type of cognitive involvement at end of life. And especially when you are in a place where you're grieving a relationship that you never got to have,
yeah,
whether it be with the parent or some other person, whatever expectations you had and you didn't get those. And then you have a shift in that person's personality. That is going to make the grief more complex.
yeah,
And that is where, I definitely talk about this is not something you do on your own. This is something that why you have to bring hospice in on time, and and make sure to use all branches of hospice. It's not just the nurse, it's not just the doctor. You
yeah,
have really critical roles with two different types of counselors, medical social worker. These are just the titles. Don't think that the medical social worker is going to come in and just call APS, or the spiritual care counselor. They're not going to try to come and try to buy you into a religion. They're
Oh,
really tailored to really come in and deal with the spiritual aspects, the spiritual or existential distress, and the emotional stuff that is happening within the family unit. So
mhm.
you really need to, this is not something you can figure out on your own, because like you said in your example, this change is really going to make it complicated, and it is going to cause complex grief, especially when the person dies, because you're grieving a number of things, not just the loss of that person.
Yeah.
And some of these changes are inevitable. So you have to recognize that you will be grieving that person changing. You're going to be grieving also that relationship that you never got and you felt like you deserved. And
Mhm.
know that that is actually a very normal, I hate to use the word normal, but that's a very expected, healthy response.
Right.
And it's really critical that you acknowledge it, that you validate it, and you do it with, your hospice team members. And if need be, should they say that the grief is going to be much more complex, they might outsource you to, more additional professional types of
Mm.
resources in the community. Yeah, it's a very real thing, which is why I brought it up earlier. Yeah.
That's so interesting because I think so many people think of hospice as just a doctor and some nurses coming in to make you comfortable as you proceed into death, right? I
Mhm.
don't think most people
It's part of
know
it.
there's all these other components to hospice care, that there
Yeah.
are actually, therapists, counselors,
Hmm.
people who have studied this. So are all the people who are, like, in hospice, are they getting, like, when they're doing their CEUs, which is what is that?
Hmm.
It's
Continuing
credit for
education
education.
units. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Are they're getting the most up-to-date information on
Hmm.
the intersection between mental health and dying and how to help family members, so that's why they're specialized. Because if you just like, look in the phone book and find a therapist, a generic therapist may have no experience with death and dying and may not be able
Hmm.
to help you navigate this.
Right, right. And so what's interesting is that hospice care is the only care that is so holistic. Palliative care is also very holistic now, and it has gained much more traction, which
Yeah.
is so great. And that has also broken out into different aspects of the person. But
Right.
hospice care, in terms of it being covered by insurance and everything, it is the most holistic care because it requires all hospice agencies and patients to not only have access to the RN, the case manager, but and other nurses, the team of
Mhm.
nurses, and then physicians and nurse practitioners, whoever it is. It requires access and assessments and care from two different types of counselors, which I mentioned before,
Mhm.
and also a nursing aide, which they don't just give you a bath. They do so much more. Some of them are trained in aromatherapy. Some of them are trained in healing touch. They do amazing. I mean, I learned so much from them being a bedside nurse than I
Mhm.
did, in certain things I just didn't expect. And then you have, additional types of care that have to be provided, such as like occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, things like that. So hospice is in terms of by law, in terms of the reimbursement, is the most holistic type of care because we recognize that a person is not just a physical being. They have
Right.
these other aspects to them, right? They got their emotional mental health, they've got their spiritual or religious part of them, all these things that need attention, particularly at end of life. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Well, I know we're almost at an hour, so
yep.
I
Hmm.
did wanna ask you, like, what is the thing you saw the most that the people who were passing, like, did they have? Because I know this is one of the things, "Oh, the top 10 things people who are dying say they regret," or the top 10 people, you know what I mean? The things people wish that they had done when they were still alive, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
those weird articles out there, but
Yeah.
since you had so much hands-on, like, is there, like, something that you saw repeated over and over again that's, like, such a through line that we can kind of be like, "Okay, this is just part of the process, and the person passing is gonna experience this, and it's gonna be okay," kind of thing? Like, is there anything that you wanted to share about that?
Um, there's so many different ways to go with this, but I think in terms of just what people, when they're really becoming pensive at this time of life,
Mhm.
they always just want to know that their life meant something. I think that's generally, we as humans just want to know that our lives meant something. So, in whatever way you can help your loved one to comfort them in that way, whatever it is. Now, this also needs to take into account complex type of relationships because
Right.
maybe, there are, like in the cases where we talk about these different, these tougher types of situation with parents, you may have been estranged from a parent and then you come in and you never want to be disingenuous. So you never want to do that. But that's typically most people want to know that their lives meant something to them. But I'd never want you to be forced or to feel like you have to make something up for that person from which you've been estranged.
Yeah.
That's not your job. Your job is not to fix them.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
You need to take care of yourself in this journey, and they need to deal with their own stuff.
Right.
Sometimes at this end of life, they do open up a little bit more, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
Sometimes a lot of people die the way they live, and I talk about that too. They've always lived rough, they were stubborn, and sometimes they die that way and they die being stubborn. They will hang on because they haven't let go, and that's just might be the way they have to die.
Yeah.
Yes, there are certain things, if we can talk about it and plan ahead of time, it could be so much better. But some people just need to decide, and that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And as much as we know that we could have things to be so much better, we
Right.
know things could be so much better. And I saw it too, like things could be so much better. People make their own decisions and they're going
Right.
to die how they're going to die. Okay. So there's that. And then the other thing I saw is just physically. And I think what people always get a little surprised at when they see their loved one dying, just physically
Mm.
how they physically change and they end up staying in bed and then they stop eating and then they have changes in their skin color and their hands become kind of purplish and blue or and they start to see the different color of their skin becoming gray and then their nose does a little changes the shape and the face changes the shape and the eyes, even though they're dying and they're on their last breath, their eyes are still a little open.
Mm.
So there, even in one of my YouTube videos, I linked it to another video where it showed somebody dying comfortably.
Mm.
And I encourage people to either look at that or look at some videos or some pictures, whatever your comfort level is to start with, because the more you can expose your nervous system to what a good death can look like,
Mm.
the more you can start to see, okay, this is a possibility and this is what it can actually be. This is what it can actually look like because it can be quite comfortable. And the last thing I want to say is our bodies physically, they know how to die.
Yeah.
There are processes in place that happen. And I've seen some people use that term. I didn't come up with that term. So I always want to make sure if I didn't, I credit somebody else. I don't know who it was, but they were brilliant because even though I knew it, I know the body does these processes, but
Yeah.
it really does know how to die. And it knows how to die, it knows how to release certain chemicals to help you give that euphoric feeling, to help you not be hungry, to help you rest while also feeling a little high. It's brilliant. So our bodies know what they're doing when they're dying. So
Yeah, I
that's a
think
really cool thing.
that's such a I mean, we could talk for hours about, like, the
Of course.
process of the people around the dying person
Oh gosh.
letting
Yeah.
go of control and
Uh-huh.
letting them do this
Mhm.
because like you said, the body naturally knows how to do this, and if we keep
Mhm.
trying to interfere to keep this person around longer, we're just interrupting that natural process. It's very natural. I think that's the one thing that I want people to understand is like this is gonna happen to all of us. We're all gonna
Mhm.
experience it. And yes, we have agency over it is important too, because so many times in the medical industry, people feel like they don't have a voice or that the doctors are
Yeah.
not listening or things like that. So you do have some agency over it and advocating for yourself if you are the one going through the dying process. But
Mhm.
wow, I mean, I feel like we could still talk so much. I'd like you
There's
absolutely have a
yeah,
whole
there's
book
so
about
much.
it.
Yeah, there's so much, and just because you said that one thing, hospice legally and from a legal requirement and medical requirement, it is patient-driven care. It
Mm,
actually says that in the regulations. So again, in the medical system that we're typically used to before we're really sick and dying, we're just kind of used to going there and doing whatever the doctor tells us to do.
yeah.
This is patient-driven care.
Mm.
And it's supposed to be that way. So it is a really nice approach to care and medical care
Yeah.
end of life. So that's a
You
really
know,
cool thing. But yeah.
that's to speak on that is I have never heard anybody, like, talk shit about hospice. Like, all I've ever
Oh, they
heard
can.
I mean
They
I mean,
can
for
because
me,
shit
it's
happens.
always been like, hospice just was so beautiful,
Mhm.
and they came in and did such wonderful things, and they made everything so easy, and they were
Mhm.
so helpful and so kind and so loving. And I just really wish the entire medical establishment would kind of get on board with that patient-driven care,
Yeah,
because I
it's
do
so.
think everybody's lives globally would be better if
Mhm.
it were based on that same model. But that's a podcast for another day. But
Oh my gosh, yeah.
thank you so much, Abigail, for
You're
coming
welcome.
on. I feel
Thank
like
you.
your book is going to be so great. I will link it in the show notes. It's called
Thank you.
Die Better. Is that correct?
Mhm. It's called, Everybody's Doing It, so Let's Die Better,
Okay.
and it's the 31-day companion for caregivers facing the final chapter with their loved one. So,
Great. And you have so much free information on your Instagram as well. Is
oh,
there any
yes.
other thing that they can check out to learn more about your work?
Yep, and I do have, if you go to my website and just scroll down, you can access my, yes, my social media, but and also that it does include my YouTube channel and my
Okay.
podcast. And, for people who want to, I do allow free 15 minutes,
Oh, cool.
meeting with me. Of course, none of it is medical advice, but just, for some general education, or some people have specific questions about things. So happy to do that for 15 minutes, for people.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely take advantage of that as a resource, because I'm sure there's tons of questions that came up as people were listening to this
Mhm.
that they now can schedule and ask you personally, so that
Definitely.
they can get customized, to their own needs. But
Mhm.
thank you again, Abigail, for coming on. Everybody go get her book. Do you have it in audiobook, or is it just paperback right
Not audiobook right now. It is available in Kindle for
now? Oh,
4.99, and then it is also available in paperback. So, yes. Mhm.
awesome. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching this week's episode of Open Wound Podcast, and we'll see you again next time.